trying hard to get me to come back. Drive truck.
Look at that.
$15,000 bonus.
That's a perfect way to start this episode.
No, it's like, that's not right.
Hi, I'm Mike. This is John Trimble, who's checking his phone right now and
Yeah,
doing
we're
other
playing
stuff.
around.
It's all right. Welcome to this episode of Catch the Vision, which is our leadership podcast, where we go over practices and principles of leadership so that we can take do what we can to try to fill the leadership void. And I think in this case, at a minimum, we're trying to help fill that void by empowering and inspiring people to step up to the leadership callings that are actually kind of knocking on the doorstep right now.
Yeah, and I was thinking on the way over here, Mike, we gotta encourage people to comment.
Yeah, I agree.
We need the comments. Tell us what you think. You're an idiot. You're all wet. We don't agree.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Well, I mean, one of the things I really want to do, I keep forgetting, and I get kind of super busy, but I need to poke Bob McManus to try to be our producer, which would be really nice because over here is like the producing board. And what would be nice...
Well, that guy you told me about.
Yeah, so what would be nice is instead with this, I could actually view the comments and we can see it in real time. But bouncing back and forth between them is like uber...
Possible,
it's very difficult when you're doing it.
Yeah.
But there's this... Let's see.
Yeah, but if you make comments, and you kind of say... Because I was thinking about this as well. We said this before. This stuff can't always be taught. It has to be caught.
Yeah.
You got to kind of catch it and say, hey, what I see is this. If you caught something from something you said or I said, then let us know. We'll read them. We'll take that into account.
Yeah.
And then we'll send you back and say, you're all wet. We don't agree with you. Or we'll say, wow, that was really good. I mean, it'll go both ways.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely like the idea of creating much more of a dialogue out there as well, kind of feeding in here.
Yeah.
Now, I will say it's very possible with a lot of people that we know that we're probably more likely to hear it in person.
Yeah.
Unless it's, Liz or somebody.
Well, some of my
online.
3,000 friends, I have almost 5,000 on Facebook, but some of my 2,000 to 3,000 friends in Elam, where I graduated from and what I've been ordained with for years, are starting to catch on and listening. And I want to hear from you guys too, because that helps us, helps me anyway. I mean, John, you should know better. This is not good. Okay. Or, hey, that's good. Why don't you try this?
I do wonder if, in order to evoke some more of that, we would have to be more controversial, more poking and more prodding.
Evoke and provoke.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know exactly what that... For me, I have to fall into that. I'm not going to just do it. I mean, one of the things that I just poked a bunch of people on Facebook about is... this is... I guess to some extent, this kind of makes sense in this forum to talk about it, is in my prior life, to some extent prior life, I was an intelligence professional. And I've had to, as part of that, go overseas and go be put into a clearly uncertain location to do what intelligence people do, which is you're trying to assess what the uncertainties are and then help people do things with that. So they're actually making decisions that, in the case of the military, that affect people's lives and tons of money and operations and all that kind of stuff. And so what you try to do is try to reduce uncertainty, which is for sure a leadership activity. Because when people are uncertain, they start acting stupid. They start acting crazy. Yeah. And because even if nothing's happening, they will respond to the uncertainty by just doing like flailing out and going crazy. So anyways, I posted on Facebook that people's use of information is now, I don't think people understand to the extent that information is being used against people everywhere. And the first time I ran into that, I was 23 years old in Afghanistan, and I'll never forget, there was this news story that was run saying that Marines were burning a bunch of Korans or something like that. And that was basically creating this political backlash both in Afghanistan, like and elsewhere. And they were doing it supposedly in our like where we were operating. And so there was no merit to it whatsoever. And what was crazy about it, this is like just totally insane to believe. Like, this place is remote. Like, let me tell you what, this is remote. And yet somebody had to actually bust an entire group of people to this area in the middle of nowhere so that they could protest. That's very unnatural. And so they did that so that they could create this story and basically evoke it out there to create some sort of political backlash. Now, I basically found that even in Afghanistan in the middle of nowhere, they can bust these people in to go do this stuff and create nonsense because people who are local, they're not protesting. They're getting on with their daily lives and doing stuff. Yeah. But long story short, I left there and realized that the kind of work that we could put into ferreting information, the average person does not have those resources.
No, yeah.
We had entire teams of people in multiple locations running intelligence operations where they were getting and finding people, sending them back out. That, like, information would come in because interested parties always want to tell you stuff. But what they're telling you could be anything and everything. In fact, it's normally the more sensational it is, the more likely that they're going to be compensated. That's just what people know because it's critical information. So before just giving that information over to decision makers, it would have to go through this long ferreting process. Well, the reason why that's relevant is, again, people were making decisions based on it, and you would not know whether that information was actually specifically tailored to create a situation where you go in the wrong direction.
Right.
And that happens all the time. Now, the reality is the world that we all live in right now, that's happening en masse everywhere. And the information, people do not, and I think this is more and more, this is actually very relevant to leadership because when you're doing leadership, you're not just sharing information out there. You're actually attempting to move people in their behaviors and their attitudes and like create people, like actually get them to move. And the people who we are leading are completely spun around with information that is not helpful to them or anything they care about.
Yep.
That's a real problem.
Yep. Well, that's too much information.
It's too much information.
TMI.
It is TMI.
Yeah.
And most of it is not relevant.
And now the big deal is misinformation and what's the other thing called?
Malinformation.
Malinformation.
Disinformation. These are all true. These are all coined recently. But what I'm telling you right now, that happened in 2009.
Yeah.
That's those terms. That's exactly what it is.
Yep.
Which it's funny, the people who are normally crying aloud about this stuff, they are the ones who are doing the most of this stuff. Yep. They are definitely involved in information operations. Whereas other people who, on maybe some of the other side of the political spectrum, they're falling prey to information operations.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, again, in this post, I just told people, like, you should ask yourself, what do you gain by accepting this to be true? And it's almost always nothing. You actually give power over to somebody else who you don't even know, or some cause you do not know, and you're always like, you feel powerless. You have increase in anger and fear. None of those are good for making any decision that you have. None of them.
Yep. And that, again, is why I revert back a couple of weeks ago when I said, if the leader is not up on this and with it,
yeah, you're right.
He loses people because they don't know either.
Yeah.
And if he don't know, everybody don't know, and suddenly it's like, that's not a leader. If he's lost on what's going on, he begins to be looked as weak.
Yep.
And that doesn't help. That's why I meant, if you're not up on I don't mean you got to know all the news, but you got to be up on stuff.
Yeah, you got to know what's going on.
Yeah.
You got to know what people are focused on. That's what it is. And in my leadership book, I wrote down, like, in the introduction, which I almost feel like the introduction is like the best part of the book, because I'm really laying it out of, like,
yeah.
And I went and read it recently. I'm like, yep, it's all true. And one of those things that I wrote was, what matters is what people are doing. That's what they care about, and their behaviors that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And as it relates to a leader, their eyes, what they're focused on is what they're putting their energies towards. And you have to know what those things are, because you can't, if you really believe they need to focus in that direction and they're over here, you need to know what they're focusing on.
Yep.
And you can talk to why they care about it, what their concerns are, or, their beliefs of how it's good for them. But as you mentioned that, there was something that had come to mind of concern of manipulators using the same thing, that they're looking at what you're paying attention to, and oftentimes they lean into it.
Yep, sure.
And they'll say, oh yeah, that's the biggest problem ever.
Yeah.
Buy my ebook today.
And then I just saw something where they put a picture of 7, 8 old leaders like Oral Roberts and some of them old guys way back when.
Yeah.
And they put it on, and a whole bunch of people said, look at us group of charlatans. Look at these lousy leaders. Look at these and they're giving them a hard time and knocking them down. And I'm saying, I'm not gonna say they can't say that about some of them.
Yeah.
But the thing I saw was, like they put on John Osteen, and they said he was. I knew John Osteen. I was with him, talked to them, I sat down with T.L. Osborne and his wife Daisy. I mean, they were real people with real problems, with real stuff, but they had anointing and a gifting. They were leaders in their own field, in their own situation. But I saw something that was interesting, like you were just saying. Sometimes leaders get so narrowly focused on their one gig, their one thing. And I have to admit, I did this too, where I was in the Word of God trying to find a word from the Lord and that kind of stuff, but I really wasn't wide open, and I wouldn't entertain anything else. And so I lost some attention, and I lost some good, solid, bring home points, because I was on my one narrow-minded thing. I was narrow-minded. I really wasn't up on what was interesting to people, or really what the whole thing was about in the church or wherever I was leading. And so now I like to say that I'm a little more well-rounded about that stuff and more open to that. But before I wouldn't even entertain it. And so no, I don't want to think that way. And leaders, I think, have to be careful not to reject all that, take it into account with a grain of salt, and maybe God's saying something in that area, and it could be unrelated to the exact point that you're making, but it could be very important as a leader. I mean, I'm just seeing that as an ex-leader. I mean, I'm not pastoring a church anymore, or any leader of anything specific, but I want to be a little more well-rounded. If I'm not, then I think we lose the audience to some degree.
I know for me, I'm definitely guilty of this. Definitively guilty of this. I've lived a generally alternative lifestyle my entire life. And so what that means is I've actually been a very effective leader for people, relatively effective leader for people who are on the fringes rather than the mainstream. That has just always been the case. I could point to a million examples of where that's the case. And normally, it's because I'm interested in something, so I'm going down that particular path, and there's other people that are interested as well, or they're disenfranchised, or whatever the more appropriate term is to describe it. I mean, disenfranchised has to do with voting, but it's not a voting thing. And from that, as I've moved out of those niches, more out into different spaces, I've actually I've struggled. I'm a person who, as a doer type who is much more technically inclined, I do the work.
Focused on the thing that you're after, yeah.
And I would say as well, I'm a go deep, not a go shallow person, just by nature. And so I know, like you walked in just now as I'm like working on computer stuff. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for so long that it's whatever. But it's put me at odds with different people and their beliefs about things, because they believe something about it that's not true. And so what I find myself oftentimes in is being this super controversial person, which I'm never trying to be, trying to go like, this is actually really what it is. Coming from a person who generally knows. I'm going to say actually knows.
Yep.
And so that's a struggle for me. And what that normally comes off as very antagonistic, and maybe antagonistic's not the right word, but you get the gist.
Yeah.
And I'd said this last time about oftentimes if I meet new people, I'm not as super friendly.
Yeah.
I'm not playing that game usually.
Right. Yeah. Well, another thing made me think about that's important is we need to bring some definition to certain areas that we're dealing with as leaders. I'll give you a case in point. We were talking about leaders with a bunch of pastors, and we were saying some are led like a business, some are led like a church, some are led like a family. You know, the pastor always struggles with Uncle Harry who comes in with his opinion, and everybody likes Uncle Harry. What are you going to do with that when Uncle Harry said this and it wasn't right?
Yeah.
And you got to define. This is the Uncle Harry version, but we're not doing Uncle Harry. We're doing what the Lord is telling us to do. So you have to kind of define some things, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Because well, not Uncle Harry. He's wonderful. Well, yes, but it's not defining the situation here. We need to take a look at that. It's very nice. He's very nice. Nothing against him, but this is the view or the vision or the practice or the principle that we need to go after, and not just what Uncle Harry says. Well,
yeah.
That's a family-led church. When the guy that's in charge, everybody listens to him. We used to call them the bell heifer. As long as he's ringing his bell, everybody's listening. Well, yeah, but no. A leader has to define here what the Spirit of God is saying, not just what the humanism is saying or a human aspect, and we don't like to do that because, well, you can't denounce or diss Uncle Harry. Well, we diss a lot of other things that are wrong leadership and that are wrong truth. We have to define some of that. So I think part of the principles of a leader is to define, have some definition about certain things that makes sense. You can't. Well, I just don't like Harry.
I mean, that's
not enough?
Is this really? I'm thinking about this. This makes a lot of sense because we're talking about oftentimes the herds running off the cliff, and they want to jump off. And it's like, well, no, we're not going to do that. Even though the person in the front is telling them we're running in this direction.
It's Uncle Harry or whatever.
Do you think that part of the way to do that is to continue to point back to the vision? Because to me, it seems like this is the power of the vision. Because these things, my interpretation of this is normally these things would be at a stray because they are now going in a different direction than the vision is.
There's no question, because without a vision, the people will not commit themselves to the vision.
That's true.
If they don't see the vision, they're like, who cares? I don't want. Dwell without restraint, the Bible says. Whatever, we're not going to go for that. You got to commit to this, but you also got to catch it. You got to see it. Yeah. And if you don't, there goes the tangents. Off on a tangent. And that's the biggest thing for leaders, because it's sometimes I've heard my friend say it's like herding cats. But if you get all the cats to look at that one thing that we're going to go, the whole picture, we're going toward that. Okay, that makes sense. We'll go. That helps people go toward that vision.
And there's so many things that I got hit with as you were saying that of
the
many things that come up. And I mean, I get it. Especially when I will say, as you got momentum and you're moving forward, it's almost easier to go on a tangent. To some extent, because
no
these things will come in, these like kind of nano ideas will come in, and it's kind of like Pac-Man. You're eating the little pellets, and you turn left and you turn right. And next thing, you're really supposed to go that way, but it took one tiny little turn here and there, and
that's the danger. That's the hard thing, and that's why. When we talked earlier about having principles and practices, there's some practices that leaders should not do. And there are some principles that leaders should stick to. And that principle is some of these things that we were talking about, integrity. And we have to have some of those things stuck to, or we lose our way. And I think the church loses its way because the leader is insecure, it doesn't dare to stand up for that, or whatever the case may be. And so now we got a vacuum. And who's going to stand up and lead us the right way,
Yeah.
And for 400 years they didn't hear from God. Now God rose Moses. Look at how much they buffeted him. Goodness sakes. I don't know how Moses ever got through. He got to a point where he's so mad at him, he threw the tablets at him. I mean, And that's another thing about leadership. I mean, that's human. That's okay. I understand. It's understandable. But people got to catch. And here's another thing on the other side of that. Leaders got to impart. They got to explain the vision. They got to define it, because otherwise we don't know where we're going. What's the whole idea here? Oh, okay, that's that. I caught it now. That makes such a big difference. I was talking to my wife earlier about, it's nice that you got a conviction for something, but you haven't really got a revelation. I think we should go this way, and that sounds good for the vision that he's sharing, but what if he makes a turn that clarifies the vision a little bit? No, my conviction is this way. Well, you just went right by him. He made a turn. You went right because of your conviction, and you don't have the revelation. If it's revealed to you what he's doing, where he's going, suddenly people say, no, I see where he's going. And that kind of goes to another thing that I was going to talk about too, is I like to know the heart of the leader. I can't just have a smart leader. I like smart guys like you. I like it. But I got to get your heart. If your heart's screwed up, that makes me scary. That makes me scared. His heart's kind of nasty. His heart's not in the right place. And that's another situation.
Yeah.
And I think that takes the dealings of God and life and all that stuff. But everybody wanted to know my heart. Everywhere I went, what's your heart? What's your heart? What's your heart? And I mean, after a while, it was too much. And you can't fix everything. But if they got the idea that I had a good heart in my vision and then I'm sharing, they were willing to be a part of it and catch.
What does that mean? Let's go a little deeper.
You go a little deeper.
What does it mean by heart? What are we talking about here?
Am I really into it? A lot of people say, well, I think I got what you're saying, but you don't sound like you're really into it. I don't think your heart is there.
I see.
And if your heart's not there, they'll catch it. I don't know. I don't know how much you can hide, but that you can't hide.
No, I don't think you can hide character very easily at all.
I mean, it's impossible. I think, anyway. Sooner or later.
Sooner or later. I mean, I think we've seen that time and time again, that people will, in one of the major chapters of my book is on, you could say, kind of self-development. It's kind of that general nature of self-development. And what it really is talking about is it's talking about character. And the nature of your character is actually a limit to what people can actually, to how much you can lead. And if your character is not larger, you can't actually lead more. You just can't, because your character will show up all the time. Whether you show up or not, your character will show up. And it will show up in all the times that you don't want it to show up. But having said that, and this is the kind of weird mind game of being human, sometimes when you think, and this is probably more for the male left brain types out there, but maybe everybody, that it sometimes when you accidentally let your hair down, you've actually shown you have really good character. And that does happen.
Yeah.
Where you've now are getting pushed to the point where you're going to grow to the occasion. And deal with the situation, because those are often times where people are kind of really measured, is how do you handle conflict? How do you handle like difficult situations? And
no question.
I mean, you're talking about heart. That gets to the center of a person is what's going to trigger them. What are they going to get upset on?
Yeah.
And you saw last night, if somebody threatens me, I'm going to jump out of the seat. It's going to be I'm going to squash that so fast it's ridiculous. I am triggered on that stuff because I will not be veiled threatened by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Because I already know man is man, and I'm not going to be threatened by man. That's just period. That's who I am. I've run into that situation, but I will say my day-to-day whatever, I manage that very well. I don't try to project that. I'm not like that's not him. But when the time comes, I will rise to the occasion.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, because I was in a situation, just to talk about something practical, where I was just trying to ask simple questions of someone.
Oh, okay.
And they were being very rude and obstinate about saying what I wanted to hear. I was trying to get across. I was actually asking how this electrical box works and why it's set this way and not another
I see.
way. And
Yeah.
I was trying to get information from him. He's an electrician, but he's in the church, and he just kept buffing at me. And the guy that was with me in the church, another guy, good guy, he couldn't figure out why is he giving him such a hard time. And I finally had my fill of it. So I turned to him and said, look, if you're not with me and you don't want to help me or be a part of it, leave.
Oh man.
I was at that point where just leave. Later I went and apologized because there was a young lady there, a young Christian, and I didn't want her to get the wrong idea. So I apologized to her and I apologized to him saying, look, I shouldn't have told you to leave. But really, if you're not there, then okay, you're not there. Get out of here. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I'm not trying. But at that moment, I was heated. I was like, I've had enough of this. Just get out. I think I said leave. I'm pretty sure I said leave. Now, later, that was a learning experience for me, too. Because I found, that's what I was looking for. You're going to get upset and impatient with anybody in this church, and then you're going to hit them with go.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how it came out. And they had a big stink about it. And I was like, that's not it at all, but that's okay. If you want to believe that, you can. I just kept on going. And then COVID hit, and that closed us down. It was like in the middle of some of that. But I learned from it. It's okay. Can't, even at that moment, you manage it. You say, I really like to tell this guy to go fly a kite.
Yeah.
But honestly, he's entitled to just as much leadership as anyone else. And so we got to be careful about that. Leaders have to be careful about that. I'm sure some of you out there have a leader that did something. You go, I can't follow him anymore because he just did this. He moved out in some human way. And I'm saying, well, good luck with that because it's like you join the perfect church, you're going to ruin it if you join it. You know what I mean?
I will definitely say church in particular. That is, I consider church to be almost the base of society. And base being like it's the bottom, and the bottom being you're not going to get the good stuff there. You're not actually the effort of a church, and I say church kind of TM like the building, the organization, not like the more proper general term, spiritual term of church. It's there, but its purpose is to raise people up. But the people that they're raising up aren't way up here. They're down here. There may be a couple people up here, and that's the complexity of a multi-dimensional church is raising the top people and the bottom people. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's at the bottom, and if it's you take it in like a hike term, if you go on a hike, it's the person who's all the way in the back, and they're trying to get the people who are stragglers to try to get them moving further forward. And so as a result, you're gonna get people who are.
Every kind.
Yeah, every kind.
And, I think that's what, ecclesia is the word they use for church, which just means called out ones. And I used to say to them, what do you think he's calling you out of? He's not calling you out of the tippity top and you're the best. He's calling you out of the dregs and the place where you don't see anything. He's calling you out of that. That's where you are, exactly. You're not really called out to be higher than anybody else or in a greater place. It's really you're coming out of some of that crap that you were in.
Yes.
Sorry for that word. Some people don't like that one either. But the reality is you're called out of that stuff so that you can function better and join the team and see the whole picture and all that kind of thing. That's called out. So that's what that's what they call the church, ecclesia, called out. And I agree with that. That sometimes it goes to people's heads that I'm, even Korah and some of them people with Moses said, well, you're no different than I am. I'm a human being I'm in this crap, so just like you. Why can't I be the guy? Why can't I be the leader? And that depends on if you're called. I'm sorry, you're not called. I mean, go ahead, give it a whirl. I mean, Moses didn't stand his way, but God said, no, that was wrong. It was evil, and you attacked my anointed. And, it says something like 30,000 people died as a result of that. That's pretty serious. That's pretty serious. I don't want to get into why God did that and allowed that. That's another story for another time. I can deal with that later. But I do know that it's important for you to be called and be in a place of leadership because you're called to be. You can't just walk in and say, you know, of your business where you work in D.C. or whatever. I'm going to be in charge, the CEO now. Everybody's going to look at you. What are you, out of your mind?
Yeah, it didn't work that way.
You know, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't fly. You can't just make that decision on your own. And that's why if you're in a church or a group with a leader, you got to catch the vision. You know, I can't say it enough. You've got to catch the big picture here. Where are we going? That helps you stay on track. It may be out there, you may be, you know, way over here to the left or to the right of your friend, but you're going in the same direction, basically. And that's important. It's very, very important for people not to get on a tangent.
What's the first on your list today? I think I know what it is.
I said...
I think I remember what it is.
Well, honest.
There it goes, honesty, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, honest.
Why do you think, what's the nature of honesty?
Yeah.
Like, what does this have to do with leadership? Like, why is it on that list of all the things?
Well, I look at it as don't be fake. To me, dishonesty is phoniness. You know, it does say there not to be phony, too. We have verses for that. I think a lot of people are phony. And I just don't like the phony baloney, and no one else does either. If a leader
what's phony? I mean,
he's
certainly
not real. He's not real. He's not down to earth.
Let's talk about real people, because I can imagine very easily internet fake. Internet fake is like holy crap everywhere. That's one of the things that I was talking about. That on the internet in particular, if you're trying to get information and you're trying to learn about something, and you use the internet as your tool, you're Good luck.
Good luck.
Because it's like the hyper extreme of sensational, that the most sensational moves to the top. So it's pretty easy to find the phony people. It's not even to say that they're not, like, you know, in the business space, there's tons of like, oh, let me show you how to make money. It's not to say that they're not like wealthy, but all they're doing is like a Ponzi scheme. They're getting wealthy by showing you how to get wealthy and getting wealthier. Money. It doesn't make any sense. But anyways, what does a regular person look like who is phony? The people we're actually going to lead.
Well, if they're phony, again, we talked about character. If they're phony, it'll show up in time. It isn't always right away, because sheep are sheep. People don't get it right away. He sounds so good. He's great. He's wonderful. We're going to check him out. And then months later, weeks later, they go, he's not really real. He's not in this for the right reasons. Phoniness is, dishonesty is phoniness. He's not really, he's fake. He's not really after this. This is and that's how I see it. If you're going to be honest, now, not just the fact that you shouldn't tell a lie and be honest about, do you have $5? No, and you got $100, and that's not honest. I got money, but I want to tell you how much. That's honest. So there is a certain part about being honest about stuff, and I agree with that. But not to be phony is big, because there are people, and here's another thing too, you said about letting your hair down. That's where people go, this guy maybe ain't so real as I thought he was, when that happens.
Yeah.
And that shakes the foundation.
Well, and specifically to add to this, that's when the person turns on what they previously has said and really lean in a completely different direction.
Right.
Which is very different than people who grow seemingly out of nowhere on a topic that you've kind of hit like the proverbial landmine. I think that actually shows their genuineness, just because they don't bring that stuff up. But what you're really talking about is where all of a sudden the rubber's meeting the road, it's going in this direction, and all of a sudden they're coming up and going like, that way, out of nowhere.
I'm convinced that God likes to have imperfect, stupid heads be in leadership. Not because they're insecure. Yeah. I mean, there are some insecure leaders that are true leaders. I mean, they're real, they're honest, but they're insecure about things because of the way they grew up or whatever. But I think he likes to have, it says, not many noble, not many mighty, not many wise. He doesn't call them people. So that means the unmighty, the weak, the stupid. He's calling those people. And we're going like, wait a minute, why are you doing that, God? This is a really serious thing. And I think he gets the glory when it really happens, because nobody can say, "Oh, John, you did that. Wow, you're something." Nobody can really say that. No one's ever said that to me, but no one can really say it. They're going to say that was God, and we're happy with that. If it was God, we're happy with that. If you're a leader, you're happy with it. You don't have to have the praise and the adulation. Right? You have to have someone say that was God. That was something that really hit me home and helped me. That was a God thing. That's what you're looking for, and but God doesn't seem to mind if you're a dumbhead, if you're stupid, if you're weak, if you come off as when David came to slay Goliath, he was just out taking care of his sheep. And when he walked up, most everybody, even his brothers, said, "Who do you think you are? Get out of here and go back to the sheep." But David killed Goliath, which changed the whole altar of history right there. So he gets the glory. He ain't and then David fell with Bathsheba, and David had a problem with the baby once it was born. It took a long time to straighten out. And he had all of his people in Ziklag. They wanted to kill him. They wanted to stone him. David wasn't perfect in any way, shape, or form, and nor was the disciple Peter. Dumb as a rock. I mean, pretty much like a rock. He just never caught it until he caught it. Then he lived that way for the rest of his life, but he never caught it for the longest time. So I just, God, I don't try to share in a way that will make the leader better or perfect. I share in a way to say, he chose me, little country boy up in apple trees. I always say that because I remember when he called me in the apple orchard. And I'm like, what? And then I said, no, thank you. He said, I'm calling you to minister. I go, no, thank you. I mean, he didn't even have willingness at that point, but he still called, and I had to answer.
So how did you get this calling? Like, let's dip in. I'm kind of curious a little bit more. Like, what was the pressures?
Well, it wasn't anything. I was a farm boy.
Yeah.
Working on a farm. There was nothing. I didn't even go to church. I mean, I knew Jesus was Lord. I got saved. I believed that. But then when he started calling me, I was working with my grandfather on the apple farm and apple orchard, and I just knew that there was this pull inside me to say, you got to go toward this. And it ended up being Elam where he wanted me to go, but I didn't know that then. I just knew ministry. I mean, what do I know about ministry? I saw a minister with a collar on, that's a ministry. No, thank you. I just was not interested. But that wasn't it. That wasn't really what he was asking me to do. However, I found out about later what he wanted me to go, where he wanted me to go. And I graduated at Elam and took my church. Just before graduation, took a church in Ontario. But, I just feel like there was something I knew that if I didn't do it, I would regret it. It was something I had to obey and go after, or I wouldn't be true to myself. I would feel like, I had to go. It's just it was an inner thing that said, I got to do this. And I think sometimes he put a carrot before the horse in saying some encouraging things to me. I mean, he had to encourage me. There was some encouragement there, but mostly it was no. I mean, I fought him for 3 months. No, thank you. Grandpa, you want me to get the go do it? I was trying to avoid him.
So you rebuked the Lord more than Moses.
There was no burning bush, but I remember throwing apples at a kid, and like the Lord was saying to my spirit, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean what I'm doing? I'm throwing apples at this kid. And then I went, oh, that's not a good idea. All right, now you know somebody's talking to you. And I said, all right. And I gave some conditions to God, like, bring a person in my life that will say, go here, and do this, and blah, blah, blah. I got to have some direction here. And he did. Very faithfully did. And it was with a woman. It wasn't a man that said, God's calling you to do this. And then he led me in the Holy Spirit, and that was a woman. So I never am upset about or have trouble with women leading men or women to anything that God wants to do. I mean, he'll do whatever he must do.
Yeah, to some extent, what difference does it make, I guess?
That doesn't make any difference. You can't say, well, 2 great major things that you did in your life was by a woman. So therefore women are, no, not therefore women are in ministry. Therefore God used them to touch me. Is that okay? Yeah, that's all it is. Let's not make more of it than.
I mean, it's in the Bible multiple times.
Yeah.
multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, when Jesus was resurrected and he said, Mary, go tell my brothers. Don't touch me. I haven't ascended yet, but go tell my brothers. Oh, he told the woman the greatest thing ever so women can be. Give me a break. That is not reasoning from the Bible. He chose her. She came and he said, Mary, go tell my brothers. You can't make a doctrine on, oh, therefore women can do this or women can do it. It's got nothing to do with that. Who does God call? Who is God using? Just get used to that. Enjoy that kind of thing. We want to make doctrines out of some kind of thing that happened. It's not a doctrine.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. People get really wrapped around all people get from time to time wrapped around the axle about the messenger, the method, the how.
Yep.
The how, and it's just not. It's really not that interesting. When it comes down to, I was watching a podcast the other day with a Joe Rogan podcast, and he just like incessantly kept like demanding from this sort of scientific person. He's not really a science person, but he's now in the field of science or whatever, and kept just kind of demanding to know, how does this work? How does this work? What the hell are you going to do with that information if you had it? It's nothing. That's not relevant. Because oftentimes, oftentimes what people think is, if I know how, then I can use the how for something else. But that's not how it works.
Good luck with it. Yeah.
That's not how it works. It works in mysterious ways, and it works in different ways. And it's always complex, and there's a lot of different things that happen. And admittedly, to this point, you are not in control of it all.
Right. That's right. And that's why I say, if God wants to use a woman, okay, shut up about it. You don't have to make a doctrine about it. It's not a big deal. It's kind of his choice, you know. And I remember we used to sing this song, It's My Father's World. And I like that because I tell some people, I go, look, it's not your world. You don't get the say. He does, but you don't. And you can't make a doctrine out, well, God chose a shepherd, a little shepherd boy. Okay, that's not a doctrine.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? God chose a woman. Okay, it's not. Or, God chose not many nobles, so that means he chose a slave. So let's make a doctrine, everybody should be a slave. Hello? That's not how it works. Yeah, and they do it all the time. Men in their whatever fallen state do that all the time. They make a doctrine out of something that, and I want you to know that God, even Jesus, did not live by the book. He didn't, every time he said something, say, well, it says here that I have to do it. Well, it says here it says that Jesus marveled. It said that Jesus wept. You don't know. The disciples came, hey, Jesus, they're not doing that right. He wants to rain fire down on them. And he goes, you don't even know what spirit you're from. You're whacked out, dude. Let God decide. And so I think when you get a little more well-rounded, as we talked about, and a leader that's not all hung up on himself, and I got to make the decision, and I say what's going to happen, and I say, just about the time you say, I say God does something, and you go, now I'm in trouble. Because God, you can't argue with God. You can't say, God, that's a wrong move. Come on. There's some things you have to submit to and go with if it's God, because he's a living being. He's a force. He's life itself. And it's not all written down 100%. It even says if we were to write down everything that Jesus did while he was here 3 years, it would take books beyond books beyond books.
That's just the fractional problem of reality itself. You can't. There's an infinite number of facts. Period. Full stop.
Infinite.
And so you can write it from 10,000 different perspectives. Yeah. Not possible. It's not even reasonable.
Yeah. So when he makes a decision, I say, just like I just made a decision, you know what? I think I'll go outside and mow the lawn. It's not a doctrine. He decided to go out and mow the lawn. We make such a big deal about some of these things that happened, and they're just a sovereign, on his own will decision, and we have to adjust. We have to adjust to it. We don't like it because, I would never have done that.
Yeah.
And I saw God touch a woman in Canada one time, no one can possibly do what this woman did physically possible. It's just not unless they're the athlete of the year with every muscle going on. Something happened to that woman that fell over and bowed like an arch, and she was 78. And you look, it was my eyes were like couldn't believe what I was seeing.
I mean, what happened? You've now captured my attention.
Well, she got slain in the spirit. She fell backwards.
Oh, I see.
And as she went back, she hit the ground with her hands and arched like an arch. And I saw it. And I went, uh-oh, this ain't right. This is weird. I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to tell that woman, you can't do that. I'm not going to tell that woman, that's not possible. This is wrong. No one was affected. No one, it didn't change any doctrine. It didn't change any church. This woman was blown away. And I also, in that same meeting, I had to literally carry my best friend out of that meeting with 3 other people because it was just like Jell-O. It was like all his bones were taken out. He was completely loose and out of it. I thought he turned into Jell-O. We had to literally put his arm in, then put his leg in, then this other leg, because he was just completely wasted. I can't explain that, but I'm not going to judge it. You know, people, oh, it's not God. It's not God. All these things happen. It's not God. What do you know? You know, did you go? Sorry about that. Did you go there and tell God what to do? Is that what you're telling me? Are you telling me that you know better than he does what he has to do with some people? That changed his life. For the rest of his life, he never was the same. I know another preacher, a fantastic guy, Mark, who for 17 days never left his easy chair. He was so blown away by the revelation God was giving him. 17 days. They helped him up for the bathroom, put him back in a chair for 17 days. He has been to millions of miles of ministry in his ministry. And it only started back in the 80s. So we're not talking years and years and years and years, but a good long time. He has been millions of miles ministering to small churches. And he's got some of the best messages that I have ever heard in my life.
Who's this?
His name is Mark. I can look it up. I forget his full name right now, but he's a minister with beautiful beard, beautiful. And his daughter was extremely in bad shape, some kind of scoliosis that was so bad she couldn't move and pain, and God healed her. She even had a baby, blah, blah, blah. So who said to do that? And by the way, that was in, what's that woman's preacher's name? Joyce Meyer. It was in Joyce Meyer's church that this happened. She wasn't there at the time, but he was in Joyce Meyer's church, and the pastor was Chester or something like that. I mean, those days, when those things happen, I just have to say, God, I wouldn't have done it that way. Even Mark will tell you, are you kidding me? And he wanted so much what God wanted him to do, and whatever happened, no, I can't touch that. You can't say, well, that's not God. That was part of you, Mark. I don't have time for all that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, God does what he wants to do. And it's really hard for humans to go along with that because the flesh desires against the spirit and the spirit desires against the flesh. And never the two shall meet. That's how it is. You don't like it. It's okay that you don't like it. He understands that. But when you adjust, I remember our professor, mentor for the student body at Elam, he had a little teeny square that was on the middle of his door. And he said, put all your complaints in there. I mean, you couldn't put like a letter.
An infinitely tiny square.
A letter in there. It's a little thing. And when he came in, he had another one. So you don't like what's going on, adjust on the inside of the office. Excuse me. And that was a way of teaching me and speaking to me. You got to adjust. You need to adjust. And I don't like that.
What's your other, before we get too far on a tangent,
Yeah.
what's your other,
don't get me too faithful.
Faithful.
Which again,
I think to some extent what you were describing, I think why you would need to adjust is actually by having faith.
Yeah.
And when you have less faith, you're much less likely to adjust.
Okay, I haven't thought that way before. What do
Just
you mean?
consider for a second that when you have faith in something, when somebody asks you to do something, you're kind of okay to just go do it. And when you have low faith in something, you're
Oh yeah,
you're really questioning it. You're making sure
you're not really there. Yeah.
you're making sure it's a certain kind of way. You're making sure it's comfortable and safe for you, and so on. That's not faith. That's the exact opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's true.
Why is faithfulness on your list?
Well, I think
I've got some ideas, but
what you just said was true, but I also look at it as steadfastness. Steadfast is fast means secure or tight in your stead or in your walk. You're not veering from it. You're not gonna. That's steadfast. That's faithful. We talk about Jesus being faithful all the time, and he is. He's very faithful to us in all kind of ways because he's steadfast. There's no variableness or churning or shadow of turning. Gee, can we rely on him to stay that way? What if we follow him and then he decides to go another? No, none of that. He's steadfast.
Yep.
He's faithful, and so I like that for that reason because I know I can count on him. So with a leader, you got to be able to count on him to keep it up, to keep going that way. And then when they fall, we want to kill them. Instead of saying,
Yeah.
he fell, he's a human being. Why don't we work with him back on the road to go on? But we don't want to do that because we judge, and we shouldn't. We make the determination he's useless, he's no good anymore.
Oh, I see.
And we're going and God's like, well, that's what you say, but I'm using him. I called him, I'm using him. David screwed up with Bathsheba. David screwed up with Ziklag. But that's my guy. That's my guy. You don't like it? Too bad. He's faithful. He's steadfast. That's how I see it.
What when I think about faithful, again, I'm going to go back to what I would call a principle of leadership is setting an example. And again, I think we mentioned this maybe is either last episode or two before, that if you want other people to be faithful, you have to be faithful to them. And you need to have that because again, you're guiding and directing people, and the guiding only happens when you have a belief in that person. But you have to have the flip side of that too. You can't just have it doesn't work that a leader can have low faith and the flock. That's not how it works. Where the flock has infinite faith in the shepherd. That's just not how it works. It's a give and take. It's part of being hip with who they are and actually knowing. But on the same token, having that kind of faith. And there's a million different ways to look at this. Everything from delegating, so getting other people to take responsibility, and literally sometimes it's just literally dropping the proverbial pile of papers in their lap and saying all right, it's all you, and sure, you can kind of ask me some questions, but it's really up to you. And that by giving that person your faith in them, I'll tell you, we were talking last night about some leadership topics, whether people knew it or not. The fastest way to start to becoming a leader of another person is to have belief in them before they have belief in themselves. And faith is one of those ways to do that. Because they usually, almost have to, especially the further you are ahead of somebody and you're trying to pull them ahead, you're seeing where they could be, and they know that they are not there, and that's the thing to change them to get them to go forward. So you have to, be steadfast in that belief. And by having that, they'll rise to some level of that occasion. Maybe they don't meet all the way there, but they will definitely move further in that direction, and proving that they were actually could be further ahead than they were.
That's why I had trouble with a guy who told me, he said, God has faith in you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have started. I go, faith in me, you're God, and I'm nothing. I'm just a human. I fail. And you go, and you have to understand what you're talking about. You got to have faith in even a loser.
Yes.
Because
That's the only way you can actually move forward. You have to have. It was funny. There was this. It was a Mormon guy I met at a tech conference, and it was funny. The tech conference is all this super flashy, whatever, and like a typical like Silicon Valley type thing where they're on stage and going, "This is going to change the world." It's so ridiculous. About data analytics and visualization, like. Only crazy tech people care about this, and it's not going to change the world. But anyways, I ended up missing nearly the majority of the conference talking just to this Mormon guy about like the Bible and faith and stuff like that because it was such a compelling conversation. And one of the things that he brought up, like I was bringing up this importance of faith, and he had brought up something I had never considered before, which was before you have faith, you have to have hope.
Absolutely. Groundwork of faith is hope.
I had never considered it before because if you do not have hope, like the belief that, well, maybe it could be possible that something is the case, you're definitely not going to lean into it, and you're definitely not going to have confidence.
Yeah.
And faith, for sure, there's elements of confidence involved as well.
Yeah.
The more faith you have, the higher confidence you have. And it's super critical for this because as you go over the bumps, which are all the time, we're talking about bumps all the time that happen. And we live in an era that is not unique. It is not, there's unique things about it, but we live in uncertain times. People have always lived in uncertain times.
Yep.
And what that really means is you or somebody are going to go through some serious bumps, and you need confidence and you need faith.
And you need hope. And
you absolutely have to have hope.
And that's what I talked about in Jordan when I was there one time. I preached a message and told them the groundwork of faith is hope. If there's no hope, you forget faith.
Yeah.
The hope that you have within us, the Bible says, to give a reason for the hope in you. Without Christ in you, the hope of glory. You don't have hope, there's no faith. That's really right on the money. Without hope, there's no, you're not going to have faith if you don't hope at all. That's just not going to happen. Those two go together. It's very powerful.
What do you think? I swear people nowadays, they say that, I actually heard.
I thought I shut that off.
Now you're actually on a phone call.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, like that.
No, I don't. I did?
Yeah, you turned the phone. You actually turned the phone on.
It's some dumb teleprompter.
I'm sure. It was like an 877 number. I easily get.
I thought I shut it off, but evidently I didn't.
What?
Sorry.
We're talking about it's all. We're talking about hope. We're talking about faith. Gotta have hope. I don't remember. I'll figure it out. I get on intellectual tangents very easily, and I'm normally depending on the other person to reel me back in because there's a point I can see the end very instantaneously, and then I try to chart that course, but getting to that point, and then all of a sudden it's like, crap, where are we at?
They did a study. Why can a person be able to talk and start talking about stuff? And they said that technically your brain sees that tree over there and says, oh, yeah, I've seen that tree. That tree is, and you say where it is, and that tree is a maple, and that tree. We have to see something in order to make, like I see a couple things.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to start talking if you can't see anything.
That's true. And that's the truth.
And I don't mean blind. If you're blind, you still see it inside.
Yeah, the reality is you're talking abstractly. You're talking about seeing is in like you've come to the.
You gotta see it.
You see the end.
Yeah.
And it's a very abstract thing, but it applies for all things.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So that's what we do. We project a certain thing and then we speak toward it. No one can do speaking without that.
Well, you say that. It's funny. Here's my counterexample to this. Whether this is true or not. There's certain types of people that are out there that I call them like they're of the Guardian class, they are storytellers, but they're not really good storytellers. They just tell things in life that are stories. And what they will often do, I've met somebody who was like the most extreme example of this, that they literally could not open their mouth and it not be a story. But not a story where it's like there's a purpose, there's like a beginning, middle, and end. It's not that. It's just literally a string of linear facts. And the thing that used to drive me crazy was it would go nowhere. But the person's like trying to capture your attention and just bringing you on this ride. You're like,
I call them people blabbermouths.
Yeah.
They're just blabbering.
It is. The situation that they're describing could have been 20 seconds long, and they've explained it over 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah,
I could have just been there.
There's so much blabber there that, in the last part of this, that we're getting close to the end here, I just want to encourage, we talked about some very serious stuff, and I'm sure some people agree. Make comments. Again, make comments. Talk to us. We're two guys that are open to hear. Last night we were all together talking about how we see certain things, and there was 4, 5, 6 different ideas and steps, and
a lot of different perspectives.
And we're all listening to all of them and perspectives and everything, and that was really good. And so we have to have that from you, or we'll just close it down because we're wasting our time.
I'll definitely say so. Right now we're streaming live on YouTube, but depending on how you see this, you might be watching this on YouTube in the future on like the pre-recorded version. This is also posted on Facebook, and eventually on there's other podcasting platforms that this would be on. Whatever the platform is that you're seeing it on, just post on there, whatever comment, and we'll take it and we'll bring it in. I actually would really love. You ever seen? Do you know who Dave Ramsey is?
Yeah.
I always really like
his course. Yeah.
I really enjoy his podcast style, or his show style, which is primarily callers who kind of call in and you're wrangling with real situations. I always thought that a leadership podcast would be phenomenal if that was the nature of how it was, which is you're actually touching on real situations that are happening. Either people looking for advice or kind of sharing their experiences and stuff like that, because it makes great material. And
I would like to do that, but sometimes you don't get all the details, and so you make a comment. Well, something, and then you didn't find out that there was a crook in the whole works, or you didn't find out that Aunt Mary was the problem and not the church, And so you didn't. And so I'm always careful about that, but I would like to do that on your comments or something like that, and then springboard from them about them. We can bring them up and talk about them.
Yeah,
because that in a way is similar to call in and well, what happens if I heard Dave Ramsey say, well, what happens if I got all this debt and blah 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 blah? Should I buy this house? And he just said, no. Next question. I mean, sooner or later, somebody's got to just be honest.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's many things, and there's so plenty of opportunities where sometimes the answer is much more definitive than people want it to be, and
sure, yeah,
and it's not always the case.
They want a simple answer, and there isn't one.
Yes. Or sometimes they want a complicated answer and there's not. I mean, again, in this case of simple, whether or not I should take on this debt, no. Next question. I mean, of course, normally that begets, okay, now explain to me like I'm 5 why that's the case. But
well, on principles and practices of leadership, we don't want to belabor the point, and we don't want to go on and on about something that we really don't need to. We want to be succinct and pointed and concise, but there are also times where you got to express. Where you saw what you see and that kind of thing, and I look forward to people wanting to hear certain stuff about leadership or their leaders and what do we do now. I'm okay with that.
So let's maybe it might make sense in closing here just a smidget, or maybe it could even make sense to do again at like the beginning of a podcast, since we're at like the end. So for somebody to have actually watched this right now, they're either coming in right at the minute, or they're like hook line on every single word. That's just a reality about the end of a podcast in particular. But what are some areas that you've been in, that you've led and you've been called in, that somebody might be interested in poking more on? Because I think that could actually be useful information.
Well, in my experience pastoring several churches, starting 2 or 3 of them, I think 3 we started. We picked up one.
And when you say started, you mean from the
square
ground.
one?
Yeah.
From square one. You learn a lot of things there, but it's also like herding cats. I've been a district rep for Elam, so I've been a part of the district trying to get things going for pastors, and kind of like a pastor of pastors. And so we have to provide some leadership for them and provide some food, because in any situation, you have sheep that want to eat, or sheep that want to learn, or sheep that want to hear something to help them. And so that's happened several times. I've been over the seas in Middle East 3 times with a great leader, Andrew, and so we've seen some stuff. And I've also been in very life and death situations where it was real death, and that was very difficult to deal with. I've also been what I want to say, a person who's been through a divorce 16 years ago and 15 or 16 years ago, and remarried, been married happily with Ginny now almost 14 years. So we've been through some serious dark times. That was the darkest for me. But if you didn't go through the darkest times, I probably don't want to talk with you. If you haven't been through something, that's why I don't sit down here and talk with a teenager. No offense, but you got a long ways to go, teenager. You know what I'm saying? No offense. They're teenagers. We love them. But I did a few. I cut a tree down. I ran an automatic screw machine. I counted up, I've had almost 50 different jobs. And I ran a company for 28 years, my own construction company. I had 8 or 9 jobs working at the same time. I had 20-some subs working for me. I've been there, done that. There's a few things that I haven't done, but not a lot. Not a lot. It's just one of those. I drive truck. I got the license for that. I'm hunter. I got all them licenses. So I've kind of been around. You pick one. I'm willing to talk about.
So you're pretty well rounded. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, see what I'm saying?
You got 50 different jobs, unless it's on the same industry.
All kinds of different industries. Oh my goodness.
Well, I mean everything from truck driving to apple picking, apparently.
From apple picking was the beginning. Working on the farm, getting eggs, watching out for the pigs because they were vicious. And causing my grandfather all kinds of grief when we were little kids, breaking out barn windows. Been there, done that. And a hunter, I love hunting certain times, certain situations, deer hunting, whatnot. But yeah, that's where we started, and I hope I'm not done yet. I feel like I've got more to give and to share, but we'll see what God provides. But I thought this is a good way to share some of these principles and practices and experiences for the likes of you, for anyone out there that can appreciate it and glean from it. And we hope you do. We hope you glean from this. And I share from my perspective, of course. It's not the be-all and end-all, but
I'll say for myself, I started, again, kind of these alternative paths. I would say the first thing that I kind of really led was in music. I created a punk band when I was like 14 years old.
I didn't do that.
No, maybe I was 16 or 15.
I didn't do that.
It was 16, that's what it was. And we had a punk band all the way till the end of high school. And I joined the Marine Corps, and I was kind of the leader of the alternative people in the Marine Corps, if you could call it that. People were kind of, again, on the fringes, had similar things in common. I was also uncommon in the sense that I was, I really leaned into the, like I was like top of my class at Intel school. And that's because instead of partying and going out, I like stayed home and like studied. So again, that's like another thing where, I'm not part of the in crowd, because the in crowd was out doing all that kind of stuff and fraternizing and all that. And I mean, I was busy doing that. But so in that case, and I did not know to the extent that I was leading people in my own unit. Again, some more alternative-y type, but in my unit, I had a very strange unit in DC. They're all Intel people. They were professional because this was the reserves. They were professionals in their own world, and then they would come and be Marines, or at least wear a suit once a month or whatever. But a lot of those people came from some very varied backgrounds, and they tend to have been kind of different people in general. So it would end up being like the perfect experience for me.
Yeah.
I did not realize my impact of that until actually after I got out, and then people started kind of telling me the story of how they joined the unit, and my name kept just popping up and up as like an influential person in the unit. I never thought about it that way. So in the meantime, during that time, I started some other bands that I was in, and I was also skateboarding, and I would lead people in skateboarding, i.e., like, let's go to these places, let's like record these videos and stuff like that. Then later, I deployed to Afghanistan, and that basically was like the pivoting point of my life, I'd say. And I was like 23, and I was given an ungodly amount of rope to hang myself, and luckily did not do that. In fact, I thrived very well there. In most larger military circumstances, I normally did not do very well because, again, it's part of that political game of people like you, they don't like you, and all that kind of stuff. But in this case, I ended up being an outsider that was basically embedded, and I ended up working out pretty well doing that. And so I spent, that's where I learned how to read the influence of people and kind of understand complex situations. My job was to really kind of unravel power dynamics in a place of which I have no dog in the fight or no understanding of that. Mm-hmm. And so I left. And then after that, eventually started farming and kind of like threw myself into that and just kind of quickly built a following of doing alternative stuff in farming. So it's kind of the same thing again, where a lot of people thought that I was trying to prove the world wrong, but that's really not what I was trying to do. Maybe I'm not very good at marketing after all, but I was trying to, again, like I told you before, have like abundance and naturally and low work and leading in that regard. And that's why people were following behind me. And that's when I started seeing this pattern of reoccurrence of like why people are following me. And it's like all of a sudden, oh, okay, now I should maybe take responsibility for this, especially now that it's, I don't know, I guess I should have been the whole time, but you know, whatever. So I started my own farm. I created a business and hired some employees, learned the hard way how hard that is and how sometimes my intuition is good and other times it is not good.
Yeah.
And learn plenty about the things that we were talking about today about, chasing too many rabbits and going down too many things. And you can sink your ship doing that.
Well, my claim to fame is failure. And I used to talk to this one mentor who said, it's okay to be a failure, but you have to be a successful failure. Once you give up and you quit, I'm a failure, I'm done, it's over with, life don't mean anything, and you quit, that's a failure. But it does say a righteous man falls 7 times, gets back up.
Well,
you have to be a successful failure.
You
got to try stuff.
I will absolutely agree with this because here's back to the information thing that I was talking about when we started. You don't know anything until you know it. And you only know it when you've lived it. You've actually got your hands around it because people, like there's an endless number of people out there who are talking about all sorts of stuff. Like there's so many books out there that are produced right now that are written by people who are just like, these are just good ideas or this is how I categorize stuff. And you listen to it like it's very logical. But like, what are the actual things that have actually happened?
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to say was once I got to, once I ended up kind of folding up business that we had in Louisiana, we then I then kind of went back out into the job market and started working, and that's where leadership practices and principles started to work in my favor, because now instead of being unconscious about, oh, I'm going down this path and a little, maybe a smidge of charisma, all of a sudden now I know what the heck is going on. And so I started applying myself times 10 compared to where I used to apply myself, where it was more like, this is so easy, and so I'm going to half-ass and get an A. Now it's, I know that they don't have anywhere near the level of, because you got to remember, like, I jumped into being an employee, as you have, after being an owner. And so I'm seeing things very differently, and I will take ownership of the entire thing, because they won't. And all of a sudden, wow, things just have totally opened up. And that to me is the power of taking leadership and seeing where there's a fire and jumping into that fire and seeing it as opportunity and not as something to be feared. And I believe that is a lot of leadership is called to shepherd, like the flock, which is on fire.
Well, I think we learned a lot about each other a little bit here. That's good too. I hope that was good for others, because we, and I speak for a lot from experience, but I have my opinions in there and the things I've been through.
Yep.
And I learned mostly by flip-flopping, failing, stupid. I have to be honest with you. I mean, there's some things that just, I look at myself and go, golly, Lord, I would have given up on me, but he never did.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He never did. He never has.
All right, we'll call it now.
Thank you.
Questions and comments, definitely give them. We definitely want to hear it. And have a great day and catch the vision.
Amen.